This is a memory card, but you know that already, don't you? And this is a camera, that Sony a7 III, one of my favourite cameras. One of these two things is most definitely more important and valuable at certain times. And in this video, I'm going to explain why. This video is sponsored by GNARBOX, so it is a review, but because it's sponsored, you are completely within your rights, which should be anyway. Take everything I say with a pinch of salt because it's sponsored. But I don't do sponsored videos for products that I don't actually recommend. You can believe me or not, it's totally up to you. Before GNARBOX brought out the 2.0, they brought out the, not 1.0, it was just called the GNARBOX. And I backed this on Kickstarter. And I think I got two. Yeah, I got two. I have no idea where the other one is. And to be completely frank with you, it was just very, very, very disappointing. Which is something which is often said about me. But anyway, 2.0 is pretty much everything that I wanted the previous GNARBOX to be, and much more. I've been using it for the past 7 weeks or so, and it's come with me on all of my shoots in loads of different countries and different jobs and personal stuff as well. And I have found it absolutely indispensable. It has just made everything so much easier. And I know what you're thinking. Sponsored video, of course he's going to say that. Yeah, you can totally think that if you want to. But my job in this video is to convince you why, despite it being a sponsored video. Do you think I can do it? Let's try. At its heart, the GNARBOX 2.0 is an in-the-field offload device. It is actually a lot more than that, and I will go through those features in a bit. But before I get on to all the nitty-gritty about the actual product, let's do a little bit of a history lesson. I know you love a bit of history, right? I wonder how many of you watching have ever shot with one of these. Well, it's actually a Betacam SX tape. But just saying tape, I wonder how many of you actually shot tape. And this is an XD cam disc, one of my favourite media that I've ever used. It's like a Blu-ray in a very solid container. Fantastic, reliable, file-based stuff. So you can reuse these, but you don't. You just stick them on the shelf. And the same with tapes. And that's how I used to shoot before we had memory cards. Well, we did have memory cards before, but we shot video on this sort of media. And when we'd shot the tape, and we finished editing it, we just put it on the shelf. We didn't back it up. We didn't duplicate it. None of that sort of stuff. Of course, things have changed enormously, and we are using memory cards. And memory cards are too expensive, still, to be used as permanent storage. Of course they are. We use them, and we reuse them. And we need to make sure that we have got copies of that card before we erase it. About 11 years ago, I did a documentary in Los Angeles and some other places on the west side of America. It was using file-based media. It was using Sony EX1 and a 35mm adapter. And the Hollywood producer was paranoid. He'd never used file-based media before. And I was backing up onto hard drives each night, and it was very slow. And he wanted lots and lots of copies. He also wanted me to burn the day shoots onto Blu-rays, which of course is totally impossible because it would have just taken way too long. And what he did was he was FedExing the individual drive back to his production company each day, and keeping a copy in his safe in the hotel room, and I was keeping 2 more copies. He was a little bit too paranoid, but I think a healthy amount of paranoia, if there is such a thing, is very important when it comes to looking after your media and your footage and your photos and everything. That takes us back to the opening statement when I said about the value of a memory card over a camera. Now, if you've shot something which is really important, which is one-off and cannot be repeated, unlike this, which is just me talking on camera, this is not a big deal. I could easily redo this, and this is actually my 9th take saying this, so it doesn't really matter too much. But most things that we shoot are incredibly important. For my paid projects, I back up to
3
separate hard drives.
2
Is your minimum.
3
Ideal.
4
Bit over the top, to be honest with you.
1
Is not enough at all. So I won't make a copy onto a hard drive and then make a copy of that copy, because if you've done a mistake, you're just going to make a copy of that mistake. It takes time though, so I will do an individual offload, check, and then onto another one. But it is time consuming, and a much better solution is to get somebody else to do it. The end of the day is also the worst time to be doing it. The problem is when you're tired, this is where things go wrong. But if you put it off to the next day, unless you get up early in the morning to do it, the danger is it's just going to accumulate and you're going to end up with more to do the next night and you'll have the same situation. I would say with my tens of thousands of memory cards that have been offloaded over the past 10 years, the problems have all been, bar maybe one or two corrupt cards, have all been down to human error. Mostly when you're tired, sometimes just a mistake, or just a general mistake. Especially if you're dealing with lots and lots of memory cards and you don't have a good system of keeping track of things. But it is human error, and you want to eliminate that as much as possible. I think the best way of me explaining is to go through a case study, and that's my new film, Shamalipi, which is, I personally think, one of the best things I've ever done. Honestly, it's a very personal film, a very emotive film, and I think it's a very beautiful film. So I do, if you haven't seen it, I do recommend seeing it. It's an important subject.
The spine cord is injured, if not cut.
It was 2 weeks of filming in Skiathos in Greece, and I was using the Fuge GFX 100 medium format camera, so I was taking lots of photos as well. So the photos were pretty sizable in file size, and the video was pretty sizable because it's a 400 megabits per second codec and 10-bit 420, and it's 4K. I was shooting about an average 300 gigabytes a day across 3 main cards, of course, backup cards in the dual slots. And that whole concept of trying to remove that offloading at the end of the day is where the GNARBOX 2.0 came in for me on this shoot. So when my card was full, rather put it into the pouch for offloading later, it went into the GNARBOX 2.0 first. We have an SD card slot here. We have a USB port here, which we can use for external card readers like XQDs or CFast. So yeah, it is only SD built in, and there's different ways that you can set it to back up. But when I'm on the go, I tend to use the most simple way, but I'll go through those in a little bit. With the GNARBOX offloading, it is SSD, so it doesn't matter if you're waving it around, moving it around. Just put it in my bag, new card into the Fuji, carried on shooting, and when I got a moment, I pulled out the GNARBOX, checked, and if it was finished, I would take the card out and then put it into my spent card pouch. There you go. And that's what I did for basically all 3, on average, of my card today. So when I got back to the hotel at the end of the day, rather than having to deal with tiredness and offloading the cards and making sure it's all good and fine, I'm still backing up. I plugged in the GNARBOX into GNARBOX 2.0 into the computer and left it running overnight. And I went to bed, tried to sleep, And the next day, I would then check in the morning that it copied fine. Initially, I think for the first 3 or 4 days, I was still checking each card and making sure that it had copied things properly. Paranoia, healthy amount of paranoia is important. But gradually, I learned to trust it, that it was working. And that is what I did for the entire length of the shoot. So what I'm going to do now is show you the way that it does back up, the different options, and we'll do a little bit of a speed test at the same time. So card 1 is a 64GB SDXC U1 and class 10. Just UHS 1 connections on them. This is a 128GB double connector, so UHS 2. So as long as your reader can support it, or your camera can support it, it's a much faster card. So, but they both have the same contents on them. I'll just see how quickly they offload. So in the SafeKeep app, I'm going to create some presets. Normally when you're backing up, everything goes into the GNARBOX folder. And then it's up to you, if it's under date, to organize it. So what I prefer to do is to create a folder beforehand and create a preset which you can select on the actual GNARBOX 2.0 device without going in the app. So I'm going to create a preset right now. I'm going to call it Lexar 64GB. Add, next, Lexar 64GB. These settings where it's got smart backup, flattened folders, followed by extension. You can't change these here that I can see. You can't put them as part of presets right now. You have to do that via the device. So let's create a second one. We're going to call this Sony 128GB. I'm going to do 2 more things. I want to just show you what it looks like when you have the 2 different options. Sony flattened and folder by extension. So these are our main menu settings. And the settings, do backup in a second, dual role, default is what we're on now. Mass storage is if you want to connect up to a computer, so it just turns this into a standard SSD drive, and USB Ethernet is for connecting up things like iPads with USB-C. Why you would ever turn checksum off, I don't know, because it checks things and this is essential. If you have this turned off, then you deserve to lose your data. All of them off, and just do basic settings. Okay, Lexar card in first. If we back up now, it's going to go straight into the GNARBOX drive. So go advanced to GNARBOX SSD, find out preset for the Lexar card, select it, and off it goes. So it does actually say our battery life right now, 86%, so that's good. So if we are getting low, we can always plug in a USB into that and just leave it going. I probably should have did a test on a smaller amount of data, really. Idiot. This one here. Let's do a test now and show you what the flattened folders looks like. We can turn off checksum, don't need that now. Flattened folders is on, and we will leave folder by extension off for this test. We will put the USB-C reader here. Let's see how that goes. This is not the most interesting part of the video, but it is very important to show you the different options, Personally, I like to keep my folder structure intact, even with Sony cameras, because there's loads of different subfolders. It's just for me, I know them very well and I like to keep them as they are. And with the Sony cameras, there's definitely some advantages to keeping your folder structure intact. So in our flattened offload, what this does is every single folder has gone. All the contents of all the folders is put into this folder called Sony Flattened that I created under the presets. It makes things a lot neater and a lot easier, and you can organize and view them by different types, so it's easier to find. One caveat is if you do take photos of RAW and JPEG, you will find two different types of JPEGs if you've shot video, that is, because when you shoot video, the camera also creates a JPEG thumbnail, and that's going to be with all the other JPEGs in that flattened structure. So just look at the size and you'll know. You can see the ones which are really small size, they're the thumbnails. Out of the two options, the flattened or the folder by extension, I would say probably the most useful is the folder by extension. Yeah, you end up with these folders which you have no idea what they're for, but don't worry, with the Sony cards, you really only need the key folders of ARW, which is your RAW photos, JPEGs, which is going to be your JPEG photos, but again, be careful because your thumbnails from your videos will be in there, and your MP4s. Other cameras are a lot simpler with their folder structure. Sony ones are just very complicated. One of the reasons why I would suggest keeping all of your folder structure intact is because there's some information in there which is actually quite useful. Things like the XMLs of each of your shots, because they do contain shooting data and we don't want to separate them really. So anyway, that's just my advice. It's there if you want it, but for Sony cameras, I think you're better off keeping it as it is. There is one other way of backing up your cards, and much more of a traditional way of doing things like you would do on a computer, and probably my favorite way of doing it, which is to simply use the app, open it up, connect up to your GNARBOX, put the card in, and then you'll see your card showing up in the browser, and then just create a new folder on the GNARBOX where you want it to be, and then copy it into there. Seems old-fashioned, but it saves you doing that organization later. My favorite option to select is actually Smart Backup. So as long as you are putting it into the same folder, so if you're doing one-touch backup, it'll always be in the same folder, or if you're using a preset, if you use the same preset each time, it'll go in the same folder. It will detect whether it's already had this card and which files it's already offloaded, so only back up new stuff, which is a really lovely feature. Without this, you could end up making multiple copies of the same files, which would be a bit of a pain when you're trying to sort things out, wouldn't it? What's really cool is you can plug in another hard drive. You don't need a computer to make a copy of what's on your GNARBOX. You can do it via the app on your phone or on a computer. And the new firmware also lets you do simultaneous backup as you're going along, which is actually very useful, especially if you have to give a hard drive to a client. It doesn't have to be an SSD, it can be a normal one. But if it's a moving part, spinning disk hard drive, then keep it steady and don't move too much. So this is the stuff from the shoot, and this is the GNARBOX. It's really easy to use. You just put the card in, press the button here, and it offloads. I will leave it with you. You got this? Great. Harriet, you got another card. Can you back that up, please? I'll just leave it here. Harriet? Hello? Harriet? So the edit that you just saw was edited in ProRes 422, but was shot on the Sony A7 III in 4K XAVCS H.264. Not the world's most fun codec to edit in. Mind you, H.265 is way worse and that definitely needs transcoding. So to be able to convert on the go, to transcode that footage into ProRes on the GNARBOX 2.0 is actually really impressive. So you just select the clips that you want to transcode, then choose a destination, and then you select ProRes 422. There is an option there for MP4 720p, and I use that quite a lot for editing on LumaFusion, just taking that 4K and then bringing it down. And you can export an XML out of LumaFusion and take that edit and put it into Premiere and relink it. I had 11.54 gigabytes of original XAVCS material, and it became 62.64 gigabytes of ProRes 422. So about 12.5 minutes of material. It took about an hour and a half-ish to transcode that. Not too bad for a small device. Now, is this something I'm going to use a lot of? I don't think so. I normally shoot a lot more than 12.5 minutes. I'm going to get much faster conversion and transcoding on my computer. But for the occasional on-the-go stuff, yeah, why not? I think it's a nice feature to have. The proxy thing, that's the thing I'm going to use the most, but it is there. And just having it on there is kind of cool. Couple of features. It is rugged. You can drop it, you can break it. You can look at Peter McKinnon's video where he destroys one completely.
A little bit of, interesting. 2, 1, drop. Straight up, so it's working, it's on.
Just a nice little soak like that, a little shake. It's hot water too, just so you know, so that's not very pleasant.
The battery lasts a fairly long time. I haven't measured it. There's probably specs on the website. But you can get spare batteries and you can plug in a USB-C battery here, which does mean you can hot swap these batteries. So when the battery is plugged in by the USB, you can pop this off and then put on a fresh battery, if you've got a fresh battery, that is. But most of the time I was simply just topping it up on the go using the USB battery. Just talk a little bit about some of the comments that I read on other people's videos and also to my own posts about GNARBOX, and just the way that people sort of deal with their data, which was sometimes quite terrifying. I think the most terrifying one that I came across was somebody said to me, for the same cost of this, they bought themselves a 1 terabyte iPad Pro, and the iPad Pro is fantastic, and they were using this to store all their footage, and they were doing all the editing on it. And I said, oh, that's cool, but you were making a copy, right? You weren't just leaving it on your iPad. And no, he wasn't. And that for me is absolutely terrifying. This is a great device, but this is not robust. This is not rugged. These things break very easily. And I'm sure that if you did break it, trying to get your footage off of it would not be too easy. It just seems like the most crazy offload device I've heard of. So I just thought I'd share that. And please don't just make a copy onto your iPad. Same as on making one copy onto your computer's hard drive, the internal hard drive. No, I can't say this enough. Multiple hard drives, okay? So you may notice this video didn't come out at the same time as loads of other people's videos, which was on the launch day. I wanted to hang on a little bit because there were some firmware updates coming, which I thought were important for me to cover. And it did give me the opportunity to actually watch to see how people were using it. Now, I'm not telling you you have to do it my way. I'm just saying this is just, for me, the way that my bad experiences have made me this way, and I think it's an important thing to do. And yeah, there were people in videos and they were putting in their cards and offloading it and then formatting that card. You know, I think that's terrifying. and I think that's wrong. Please have enough memory cards to last the day at least until you have backed it up. I do recommend having at least enough cards to last your entire shoot day. A day and a half. 2 days. 3 days really is the nice buffer, just in case there has been a screw up. And that comes down again to human error. You can still do human error with this. You can still forget to put your card in, can't you? You can still make mistakes. And data management, whilst one of the most boring aspects of filmmaking, is one of the most important aspects of filmmaking. There's no point going through all that effort if you forget to offload your card, is it? In some ways it is being marketed as a laptop replacement, and for sure you can use this as a laptop replacement, especially with the new firmware to offload to multiple hard drives, and you manage it all with the SafeKeep app. For sure, you could absolutely do that. I personally wouldn't leave my laptop behind deliberately, certainly on a job that was more than a couple of days, because it would make no sense to me, because why would I not bring my laptop? But if it was just a couple of days and I really wanted to travel light, then sure, I would feel comfortable enough doing that because of that firmware update and being able to manage it onto multiple drives. Paranoia is the word. This is the center of my media management when I'm on shoots, much like my laptop would be. And whilst I am using it in conjunction with my laptop, they are essentially doing the same job, making multiple copies and making sure your data is safe. Don't just have it on the internal drive on its own for the entire shoot. Please just make a copy, at least one copy. This isn't going to go wrong. I mean, it really shouldn't go wrong. I doubt very much that it would ever go wrong, but you could lose it. So 1 terabyte isn't enormous, and depending on what camera you're shooting and how much you're shooting and how many cameras there are, you could easily fill it up within a day anyway. So definitely have some additional drives that you can offload it to, so you can format the GNARBOX to free it up to carry on backing up on the go. It's not perfect. There's a number of things in the app and the way that it works which can definitely be improved upon, but they are improving it because they are listening and they are bringing out firmware updates frequently, which are adding loads of new features. And I'm sure that as the product matures, it's just going to get better and better and better. So even though I've used loads of different offload devices, in-the-field offload devices, so why have I taken the shine to this one so much more than the others? It's not because this is a sponsored video. It's because it's much more than just an offloading device. It is a mini computer. I can use it for making additional copies after I've done the copies, whilst I'm doing the copies. I can organize things so easily through the app. I can transcode things I want to ProRes. I'm not going to do that much, but certainly for the proxies, for on-the-go editing, absolutely. Over the past few weeks, it has become much more than just a backup device to save me time at the end of the day. I have been using it throughout the day and working off of it. I've been doing even some rough cuts of footage. I've done some transcodes into 720p ProRes, and using LumaFusion, doing some rough cuts, exporting XML, and then when I get back I can bring in. That's such a nice way of doing things. Normally I would be transferring JPEGs from my camera to my phone and working off of those, but now I can work off of the raw photos so much better without having to wait till I got to the computer. That's been wonderful. Hopefully I've shown you enough different aspects of this to show you why I think this is indispensable. Maybe you just need to actually use it yourself, I don't know. But despite this being a sponsored video, I promise you, this is a fantastic device. I just feel there's no way that I would ever not take it with me now. It just feels like just a really important basic part of my kit, as much as my memory cards are. And I think the only time I won't take it with me is if I've forgotten it. This is a memory card.